For those concerned about immigration in this election year, monthly migrant crossings are a key figure. Numbers from Customs and Border Protection show 58,000 encounters in August. That's a slight increase from July, but apprehensions are still around their lowest level in 4 years. For some added context, last December, the United States saw a record 250,000 encounters along the border. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez joins us now for more. So, Camilo, I ask you this all the time, but I'll do it again. Why are these numbers down?
Well, John, it is a combination of different factors. We know that in June, President Biden invoked his presidential powers to issue the sweeping executive action that has effectively suspended the asylum process between legal entry points along the U.S.-Mexico border. Right now, fewer migrants are being allowed to request humanitarian protection here in the U.S. after crossing the border illegally, and fewer of them are also being allowed to be released into the country with notices to appear in immigration court. And that has been a seismic change in policy, John, because as you know, these mass releases of migrants into the U.S. interior have been happening over the past few years, and officials have perceived them to be a pull factor that attracts migrants who may not have valid claims, but who are able to stay here because the U.S. cannot deport them to their home countries like Venezuela, or the asylum system is so backlogged that it cannot adjudicate their cases in an expeditious and quick manner. And so this is a dramatic change in policy that officials have been crediting for this massive drop in encounters at the border. But we also have to mention, obviously, that Mexican officials have ramped up efforts to stop many migrants from boarding buses and trains to get to the U.S. And of course, this summer, temperatures have been increasing very rapidly, and that is making the trek across the border even more difficult and potentially deadly for many migrants on the journey north. And again, the open question now, John, is whether that number continues to plateau in the coming weeks or if it increases, as historically has been the case in the fall.
So we're coming up on the fiscal year is ending for Border Patrol. What do you think the whole number will be like for the entire fiscal year in terms of migrant encounters?
Well, Border Patrol is on track to record about 1.5 million migrant apprehensions between legal entry points in fiscal year 2024. That will be the lowest tally for the agency under the Biden administration. So that is good news politically for an administration that has been plagued by massive levels of illegal immigration at the border. And it's also good news politically for Vice President Harris, who, as you know, has been trying to strike a balancing act on this tricky issue for Democrats in the election. But it is still a very high number, make no mistake about it, John, and it is still a historically high level of migration, especially because of what we saw in December, which is included in this fiscal year, when, as you know, 300,000 people were processed at and in between ports of entry along the border, a record high. So yes, this is good news politically for the administration, and it is a significant change, but it is still a very high number, John.
You previously reported, Camilo, that the triggering mechanism in the executive order, which would allow these asylum claims to start coming back, was going to change a little bit, that the administration was going to make it even harder. Can you explain that again for me?
Sure. So right now, that executive action that I mentioned that has severely restricted asylum at the border is contingent on border numbers staying above 1,500 over a 7-day average. If they drop below that threshold, the asylum restriction deactivates. However, now the Biden administration, we have learned here at CBS News, is considering amending that regulation, John, to make it even harder to deactivate. And that would be done by changing the conditions for deactivation. And one of the plans, John, that we have learned here at CBS News that they are considering is to now make it so the policy would only lift if that 1,500 number is there for at least 28 days, not just a week, not just 7 days. So obviously, that is something that has not happened in many, many years, and it is unlikely to happen anytime soon, especially before the election. And so this would really extend the policy indefinitely, and it is very likely that if, for example, Vice President Harris wins the election, that the policy would continue indefinitely. And obviously, if former President Donald Trump is elected and returns to the White House, we should also expect asylum restrictions at the border.
Camilo Montoya-Galvez, thank you so much, Camilo.